Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see everybody today. And welcome to the Forum, a weekly program of the Columbus Metro Club. My name is Sophia Pfiffner. I'm the president and CEO of the Columbus Metro Club. And for those of you who are joining us via our live stream, we're so glad you're here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're coming to you from the National Veteran and Memorial Museum in the heart of downtown Columbus. Not only is National Veteran and Memorial Museum home to CMC's weekly forums, it's proof that democracy requires something from all of us. It requires all of us to show up. Thank you so much for today's sponsors for today's forum, the Community Shelter Board, and thank you to Downtown Columbus Incorporated for providing complimentary parking, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream, and the Columbus Dispatch for being our live stream partner, where every week we're so incredibly grateful to all of the individuals who show up to participate and support community dialogue. So let's give all of them a round of applause. And then I would be remiss, every week we have a group of wonderful students in the audience. This week we have Columbus City Schools Superintendent Student Ambassador Program. These amazing young people are here from the Robert Weiler Company, thanks to a new partnership to make sure that we have young ideas and young minds in the room every single week. So let's give them a round of applause. Okay. Friends, this week's forum topic addresses an issue that nearly every Central Ohio community is grappling with. Older adults are aging right into homelessness. Across Central Ohio, older adults are facing rising housing insecurity as rents outpace fixed incomes and affordable options fall short. A new local program tested a very simple idea, giving seniors just $330 a month in rental support for an entire year. And the results were striking. Improved financial stability, better access to food and social activities, fewer emergency room visits, and stronger mental health outcomes. With today's speaker, we'll explore scalable solutions that can help stabilize older adults and strengthen Central Ohio communities. So to lead today's discussion, please welcome our amazing panelists, Shannon Isom, President and CEO of the Community Shelter Board, Columbus City Councilmember Tiara Ross, Marisa Sheldon, Director of the Age-Friendly Innovation Center at The Ohio State University's College of Social Work, and our host, Katie White, Director of the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. Katie, welcome back to CMC. We look forward to today's discussion.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie White, Executive Director of the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, or COAAA, as we love to refer to ourselves. As Sophia mentioned, older adults are facing new and rising levels of housing instability. Housing costs and rent are climbing faster than fixed incomes, and affordable housing construction is lagging behind community needs. This means older adults are more housing cost burdened than ever, spending unsustainable portions of their income on housing. Many are encountering housing insecurity and even homelessness for the first time in later life. The same challenges locally are true across the U.S. These are individuals who have worked, raised families, and contribute to our communities, now facing impossible choices between rent, food, medication, and basic needs. Consider the older homeowner whose mortgage is paid off but has increasing insurance, property tax, and home maintenance costs that outpace their retirement savings. Or consider the renter who's on a monthly payment to pay back a large medical bill following a fall, whose landlord will increase rent by $200 a month next year. These life and financial shocks, losing a spouse, a job, facing a medical crisis, they play a role in tipping someone into housing instability. And this is happening in Ohio, in our region, in our states. It's happening to our friends, our family, our neighbors, maybe even us. Today's conversation is about understanding why this is happening. So let's explore the scope of the challenge, what we're learning, and how we can move forward toward solutions that are both compassionate and practical. I'm so honored to be joined by the three of you today to have this conversation. So I'll open up with a conversation to the full panel. What are the biggest gaps in our current system that are driving the increase of older adults into homelessness?
I'll begin. This is an easy question because it unfortunately doesn't matter if you're talking about our seniors or our youth. It doesn't matter if we're talking about our families or our single men. It doesn't matter if we're talking about pregnant women. It doesn't matter if you intersect any of those things. The answer is exactly the same. The gap is housing. And it is imperative that as we ground the conversation today around our seniors, that we're not only talking about the housing gap, but we're talking about how the readiness of our system responds to one of the many vulnerable populations in our community. The other gap that I just want to note for the room is that the one thing we all hope for is that we get old. We all hope to be the aged in the room. And so this isn't an issue of the othering of what are we and how are we responding to the elderly. This is how are we reflecting ourselves in the today. And so gaps, what I will say in the end, because I can keep going, but the gap is solvable. It's solvable.
I absolutely agree, President Isom, with what you are saying. Housing is the number one issue that we have to address if we're going to address homelessness. These conversations cannot happen in silos. They must happen together. And there are a myriad of gaps. So I'm glad you put an S after the P in gaps. And I want to really keenly focus on how we are requiring our elderly individuals to spend down the little money that they do have in order to access the resources that are available to them. And so when we think about just systems failing, our federal government has created certain definitions, have created certain thresholds of income that literally make it impossible to afford housing in our community, particularly for our seniors who are on fixed income. So one of the gaps are really just ensuring that we have enough money that is not dependent on the federal government in order to intervene in housing issues for our seniors, because quite frankly, a look back of 5 years to determine what your income level should be in order to access resources is almost impossible for most of our seniors. And so you find them, if they had a family member that they could depend on, they're choosing not to depend on that family member, because now that family member's income is going to be included in whatever equation that we are using to determine what resources are available. So one of the gaps. The other thing is, that's why I'm glad to be here at CMC, and I'm glad for all of the things that CMC is doing, but just information equity. There are a lot of resources, and we talk about it in the city of Columbus often, that we are a resource-rich city and we are connection poor, and oftentimes our most vulnerable are not educated on the resources that are available to them. Those of us who are resourced know about the resources. Those of us are not. And I think that's a problem, and we need to streamline the way in which we are educating our community about resources and how to access them. So information equity and then accessibility of our resources is another gap as well. And then I'll talk about other gaps, I'm sure, as we matriculate through this conversation.
Yes, and all of the above. And I have had the pleasure of working in the space of aging for most of my career. And in that time, we have been talking about our demographics changing, and we are here. We are beyond here. Folks outside of the aging space are finally talking about this. But what I always say when I'm talking to students or presenting in the community on this is, it's not changing. This is our new normal. Our subsequent generations beyond the baby boomers are just as big. We need to understand how we support older adults today and moving forward when this is the number of folks we have. And really, I think one of the biggest gaps beyond what we've already heard is long-term support. We have done a phenomenal job. We had once-in-generation opportunities with CARES dollars and ARPA dollars to infuse one-time and emergency support, but this is not a one-time issue. The issues that older adults are facing today are long-term and need long-term solutions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Shannon, you've talked about the readiness of our system. I'd love to turn to you for this question. Your leadership at the Community Shelter Board centers you in our region's response to homelessness. You not only see the day-to-day realities within the shelter system, but also are helping to shape the broader strategy across the region. How has the profile of individuals entering the homeless system changed over time, particularly as it relates to older adults?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm making one really important distinction, is that the Community Shelter Board is the funder. We have 16 partners that do that every day, every moment by moment by moment work, and I want to make sure that we're giving space to honor their work. We have 9 emergency shelters right here in this community that stay open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and then we have the delta of our partners doing housing, and most of that housing, to start there first, and then I'll go to the shelter. Most of that housing, if not for the average age of 55 and above, physically they are older. And so either way, we have the aged needing housing that is long-term, sustainable because of chronic issues. And so that demographic has stayed about the same, although in a community that's growing, all parts of communities grow, not just the workplace. But if you have working people grow, so will you have all the other parts grow. So that has been growing. The demographic that has changed the most, though, is in the shelters. We have, on average, about 2,000 beds flexing up or down that are full with waiting lists. And the largest growing cohort that is in our emergency shelters are those people that are 62 and over, which we call the aged. We look at these numbers every quarter. We've had some quarters, some of you have heard me say it, of a 400% increase in that age group. Now, I know that maybe a couple years ago we would say, gosh, pull yourself up by your bootstrap, but we also know that that same population is first-time homeless. This isn't bootstrap pulling. This is that our rents are increasing, fixed incomes can't keep up, and there is no long-term safety net. And so what ends up happening is that someone who's been housed literally 20, 30, 40 years, all their life, are being priced out of their housing. And I like to say something, you know, if anyone has played ping pong, no, what's the machine, you know, that, you all know. That, you know, you try to make sure there's bumpers so that it won't slide in. We're seeing that 62 and over slide right in, no bumpers. And what that is causing is that because you're on a fixed income, once you are in the shelter, there you are. And there you are, and it's too hard to get out. So that demographic is by far the most striking in this community. I would say the second, and I heard actually a couple people talking about it, if you haven't seen the article about nursing homes in Ohio, I would tell you to pause and look at it. Because we have heard anecdotally about our seniors being dropped off at shelters. We know anecdotally that our seniors are moving through not only nursing homes, but hospitals and not having anywhere to go. Not sick enough to stay in a hospital, but also not well enough to go anywhere, don't have anywhere else to go. So what ends up happening is they show up in our shelters. And the shelters, I like to remind us, the shelters were made for short-term destabilization of housing. It was not made for nursing homes. It was not made for respite. It was not made for long-term housing. And so those two are the biggest demographics, those that are older and with healthcare challenges, and then those that are priced out of housing.
Thank you so much for offering that clarification and making sure our audience knows the continuum of care here. I want to bring up one comment from Rachel Lustig, CEO of Lutheran Social Services, who you work with. She said, "We see this every day at Lutheran Social Services, and it is getting worse quickly. At our Faith Mission Shelter, 33% of the participant population are seniors, and 69% self-report a disability. I'm wondering about the actual physical makeup of the shelters, and if someone might be able to touch on, is it even set up to support someone coming in with chronic illness, with disabilities that's older?
No. They weren't set up that way on purpose. As Shannon said, that is not the role of our shelters. And thinking about the individuals with disabilities that Rachel mentioned, that Katie just shared, that is not where anyone should be aging. And the shelters are intentionally not set up that way. If you have any sort of medical need, any sort of need to plug in oxygen, to have medication refrigerated, these are very normal experiences for our older adults, especially those that are on the cusp of homelessness or one life crisis away from that. It is not the place you want or should be.
I would venture to say, and President Isom can yell at me later, I would venture to say that the current way that the shelters are made up now are not best for anyone. Congregate shelter is not a thing, it's not a solution that it continues to work, and I know that President Isom is thinking about creative ways to have non-congregate shelter, to have more non-congregate shelter that provides more dignity to folks so that it's easier to transition people out of the shelter system. And so I think that, everything that we talk about today, I think when we take it from a lens of caring for the most vulnerable, of which our seniors are a part of that population, whatever solutions work for them are gonna work for everybody. And so I think as we start to think about trying to remove the stigma or the othering of our seniors, what we should first understand is whatever works for our senior population is likely going to work for our entire community. And what a wonderful way to start here and to pilot here and to think about all of the innovation that's happening with our seniors and how we can expand that, build that capacity for our entire community.
Because they've answered the question, I would love for us to then spend just a couple of seconds thinking about the question itself. The question in itself should not really be, do we need to adapt our shelters to our most aged population? But instead, if there is any adaptation that's needed, we should be doing that in housing, period. And that I would ask us, right, to be reflective that we should no longer be asking the current state to be more adaptive for people coming in, and instead to figure out how do we adapt to the current state being smaller, and that the rightness of the system is housing. And it's possible, so that's why I am noting that. That's not a vision and a dream, that's doable.
And I've heard you say before, Shannon, that the answer is not building more shelters. And I think that's, on its feet seems really simple, but is actually quite transformational in shifting the way that we think about these challenges. We're going to get to some solutions here in a minute, but it seemed like maybe each of you wanted to add one more thing.
I'll just, to echo, the solution to to homelessness is preventing it. Keeping people housed in the housing they have now, which is likely where they want to age. We know that older adults here in Central Ohio, just like across the US, the vast majority, we're talking 90, 95%, depending on what community we're talking about, want to age in their home. And if not in their home, in their community. And not every community has a shelter. Not every community has an affordable housing building that you might be lucky to get into after 4 years on a wait list. And so allowing people to age in the home they are in today is the best solution.
Yes. Did you want to say something?
I didn't know, other than agreed.
Ditto. Okay, so before we go into solutions, I want to bring in one piece that I think is extremely important, Councilmember Ross, and that's your work in the City Attorney's Office. You had, firsthand experience and insight into eviction, into other housing challenges that might not even be, sort of top of mind for reasons that might cause housing instability. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about that work?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, I spent the lion's share of my career as an assistant city attorney. I was deputy chief of a team called the Property Action Team, which was formerly called the Zone Initiative, created by former city attorney Rick Pfeiffer. We prosecuted exclusively in the environmental court, and our sole job was to make sure that property owners and landlords that did not maintain their property up to code were held accountable for doing that. Now, as you can think, over-enforcement in a space like that could could lead to mass displacement where it doesn't need to happen. And so I'm very proud that we were on a team that thought very comprehensively about what it meant to keep folks in their houses in their homes when we could. So we built what was called an owner-occupied initiative, and I can't tell you how many folks came into that program that were seniors or disabled or both, who did not have enough money to fix their code violations, were facing a physical condition that made it impossible to fix code violations, had been living in a home where that was increasingly becoming dilapidated because of, one, fear to engage with the system, fear of displacement from the home that they wanted to stay in, and just an inability and a lack of resource because, again, I could have paid off my mortgage, but my property taxes are too high. I could have owned this home for years, but because now I'm on a fixed income, if the ceiling has an issue, I don't have enough money to fix it. And so what we found was a lot of seniors were coming just with an inability to fix repairs. And when you think about a healthy continuum, you want to be able to provide those resources upstream. No one should have to wait for a lawsuit to be filed against them to access resources to fix their home so they can live in them. You want to be able to provide that early enough so that that particular home that a senior is in, at some point they might age out, but you still want that particular piece of housing stock to be available to the rest of the community. And if we don't have enough resources to offer home repair to folks and to seniors, then we are also doing a disservice to that healthy housing continuum that we have in our community. In addition to that, evictions were a big deal, but most of the time evictions, there were early indicators for evictions that came through the environmental court through complaints about code issues. So you had landlords that weren't fixing the things that they needed to fix, and you have individuals that are living very stressful lives when you walk into your home and you don't know whether or not you're gonna have hot water from one day to the next. And so then they're getting into situations where I don't think I need to pay my rent because my landlord's not fixing my issue, but they don't know that the legalities around not paying your rent will land you straight into eviction court whether or not the landlord has an outstanding code violation. And so as we think about just folks having enough information, folks being educated, folks being unafraid to engage in a system for help, thinking about moving those resources more upstream so you don't have to wait until an eviction is filed against you, so you don't have to wait until you get a code violation that says you could be facing up to 180 days in jail or $1,000 fines. All of those are scary things, and our seniors are scared to even respond to it, right? And so thinking about ways in which, one, just because you legally have to say it doesn't mean you have to say it in a scary way. You just have to make sure the person has the information. There's so many different things that we can think about that would help our seniors to really navigate this community in a way that keeps them aging in place, that keeps them in their homes, that keeps them, even if they are renting from a landlord, from having to be displaced unnecessarily.
Thank you. I think it's a great example of how there's really no easy fix. There are a lot of levers that we're trying in our community because we know the challenge is here, but there isn't one magic lever that's going to do it. And so now I want to turn us into talking more about those early interventions that you all have mentioned. One of the reasons why the conversation is so timely today is because we are fresh off of a 12-month pilot project that we want to highlight. So this question is going to start with Marisa. Tell us about the Shallow Subsidy Pilot Project. What was it? What did you learn? What stands out from the results?
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. And just want to honor that while Katie and I are up here, there are a lot of folks in the room that made this pilot project happen, both at the COAAA table and at the age-friendly table, representing the college and representing the area agency. So I really appreciated this conversation around innovation, because Columbus is a place and Central Ohio is a place where we try things, and we are often early in trying those things, and that's pretty special. Shallow subsidies and providing direct rental subsidies is happening around the country, but not with older adults. There's one other program that started before us in San Diego, and then we haven't seen the results. We think they were positive, but we are pretty proud that we were the first ever shallow subsidy program to be done within an area agency model. If you aren't familiar with the area agency model, find Katie after. They are the backbone and foundation of our aging network here in the US and here in Central Ohio. So the program was a short-term pilot. We knew we wouldn't get it right, but we learned a lot and want to be able to continue it. That enrolled current COAAA case-managed clients into a program where they received $330 each month for 12 months directly to their landlord. As you can imagine, there were lots of requirements around eligibility. One of those critical ones was that individuals were spending at least 50% of their income on rent. 50% is a pretty high mark. We consider that housing cost burden, anything over 30%. What we saw in the folks that were enrolled in both the treatment as usual, so continuing their case management and not receiving the subsidy, and those who received the subsidy along their case management, was the average at baseline, their housing cost burden was about 75%. 75% of their income every single month was going towards housing costs. That's all of it. We had some folks who were over 100%. And so when we embarked on this project together, COAAA ran the programmatic side and Age Friendly, and our team did the evaluation. Because this was new, because this was novel, we wanted to prove it. We wanted to show it worked so that we can tap into those federal investments one day, those federal dollars that can actually support this need. We looked at housing stability, we looked at well-being, we looked at health. We saw really striking results. It was a small study, so we're excited to do more. I think one that speaks to so many folks is a 55% reduction in emergency room visits for the folks that received the subsidy. Yeah, thank you. If you work in the healthcare space, if you work with older adults, you know that is a very big deal. We're talking about less than a $4,000 investment per individual. When you look at the cost of what it looks like to transport someone to the ER, that squad visit alone outpaces that. Let alone the cost once you're in the hospital. And then thinking about the trickle down of what that looks like when you want to return home or you cannot return home and need to go to a long-term care community. And while the dollars are really important and impactful to a lot of folks, for me, when I think about what we learned and what we saw, it was the comments about being able to afford quote unquote extras. And what folks defined as extras in those interviews was deciding between toilet paper and soap. Yeah. It was getting all of their diabetes medication for the first time in years. It was paying off the $10,000 credit card debt that they'd been racking up paying for rent. It was getting to go to lunch with their friend at Cracker Barrel because they had said no because the cost had gone up by $2. And so they no longer could do that. And so when I think about my own life and the dignity and autonomy I have to make my own choices, I want that when I age. I want that for my parents in their retirement. I want that for all of us. And you can't do that when you're spending 70, 80, 100 or more % of your income on housing.
Any comments or questions on that from the panel?
I'm trying to hold back to not.
Don't hold back. Do not hold back. Do not hold back.
So I end up always landing here. We talk a lot about programs and how can we, I mean, that's what we spend most of our time in our day. For those of us who are able to have jobs where we're thinking about the human condition, we talk about programs of effectiveness and how to fund those things. But the reality of it is that, and we're old enough to know that aid or Medicaid was made to take care of our children, and Medicare or care was made to take care of our aged. And when those things are under attack, which they are, that this gap will be greater. But what is really concerning is that we believe that we are going to solve the problem of the aged in housing through programming. Not us. I'm telling you, we're doing the best we can with the tools. But until there's a mindset shift, that growing old is a reflection of us, that it should be funded because it is the heart of who we are. I've said in another place, and not to get on the Bible, but you now know who I am, is that our elderly are the splendor of our crown. To treat them with patience because ultimately you will be there, and don't do to them harshly. And if we're talking about housing, it's harsh. That's harsh. So I would say that on top of all of the many programs, we're trying to figure out how to prevent our most elderly from coming into shelter because it's not good. It doesn't matter if I adapt my shelters to the best they can be. They will never be adaptable for the age to age in a shelter. Instead, we must create dollars that build communities that are intergenerational. We must get out of the mindset that isolation, even in our middle-aged and youth self, is somehow healthy when we don't see the aged. That if you are bothered by the age, it's probably because you're not around them enough. It is a problem that culturally, that the cultures that are intergenerational, we don't model, because what we know is that the elder with the youth, there's wisdom there, and then it makes for stabilizing healthy intergenerational communities. I am not interested in building a senior home where seniors become isolated, although as I senior, I get it, that you like a little peace in the world. However, it is imperative that they live as we live amongst each other, and that there should be communities to reflect that, housing diversity to reflect that, deep affordable housing to reflect that. Okay,
I can't believe you almost didn't say that. You were going to hold that back? No. The way you speak and the things you say are so powerful, and it's just so wonderful to be in a room having a conversation about this difficult topic and hear the passion from each of you on this stage. And I also think that it really exemplifies our local collaboration. We're not up here saying, you do it, you solve it, this is we are up here holding hands and saying, yes, there is an unraveling at the federal level of our social safety net that already wasn't enough, guess what? But at the local level, we are going to work arm in arm and make sure that we're protecting our community. So thank you. That brings me to another question then. What do you think we could be doing, or what are we already doing that's in the works that the audience may or may not know about, that is, working towards alleviating some of these challenges? Policies, funding, programs?
Well, you guys already probably know that we are preparing to have an influx of $500 million in our community that is specifically designed to create affordable housing. And part of that $500 million will be assigned to some innovation. Doing things that we have not done before, creating new revenue streams that aren't depending on the federal government, so that we as a city can make our own interventions and do what's right for our community. The other thing is there's a division of housing stability, and it is doing some of the things that was done in the shadow subsidy pilot, but for the entire community, because again, what's going to work for our seniors is going to work for everybody, which means that if you are at risk of being displaced from your home, there are dollars available to prevent that. So connecting to those resources in the Division of Housing Stability with the City of Columbus, it is called the Resilient Housing Initiative. That is everything from an emergency code violation that could get you displaced, all the way up to I'm having car issues, because as we work, and Councilmember Lourdes is here, as she works very hard to make sure that we are building our public transit system, the reality is, and I think the study showed, that most of our seniors are using their cars. Most of our elderly use their cars to get around. They are not using public transit. And some of our seniors are living in those cars. And so to be able to provide dollars to fix those cars really is critical to providing stability to seniors in our community. So those are some of the other things that we are doing. In addition to that, I just left a press conference. We are going to vote to have a rental registry here in our community, a first of its kind, on Monday. And that is an effort to make sure that a senior or any person in our community doesn't have to complain 20 times before an issue in their rental unit is fixed. And I think that that will be a huge step forward in ensuring that we are moving towards prevention and not reaction in our community when it comes to aging in place and being stabilized in your home.
A couple of things. I'll say what we are doing outside of prevention and diversion, which I think are the best tools we have for today. But I'll talk about one thing that we are doing and then one that I would hope to do. I'll try to be really quick with this. You've heard many times us talking about probably in community the warming centers, and certainly the warming centers are to warm. But the longer game is that the warming centers are really to get communities believing again, knowing how to do benevolence. And that if we know that communities know how to do benevolence, then they start seeing each other, and that's from the young to the old. And then if a senior can keep her home or his home, but is using their oven to heat, we hear those stories all the time. They may tell somebody because it's community again, and benevolence is there. So it is imperative that we, instead of shipping people off to a homeless center, that instead that we prevent people from going to that center, but more importantly, have communities create structures and capacity so that they know each other again, neighbors again. That's the warming center. The second that is much more of a vision is I just came from a conference this morning where we were talking very specifically about housing processes, things that we can do right now to help people stay in their house, but also just not get evicted. And we know these programs have existed during CARES and ARPA. Well, we were hearing about Milwaukee. Milwaukee put together about close to $2 million that was just considered discretionary fund. And they were focused on families. I say we have some parts of that. Why not focus on seniors? And you could call, and if it prevents you from leaving your home, if you need anything to make sure you have your medicines, that you don't have a health condition, that is something that we could give. We could partner and make sure that this becomes a fund of action very specifically for our seniors. They have seen huge success with it in Milwaukee, and I think it's something that we can duplicate. So I'm thinking about it this second, trying to figure it out. But I think we have a couple of things that we can do here.
Thank you so much.
Dude, look at that.
Does that mean money? Oh, they cut off my
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
Thank you so much.
So
I appreciate that.
I do need
appreciate
to bring us to the audience. I'm so sorry. Doug runs a tight ship around here, and he is saying it is time for audience questions. So thank you so much. As usual, I feel like we could talk about this for hours. I know we'll be staying around afterwards if anyone wants to ask questions, but it is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions, so I'm going to turn that over to Doug. You can do it in person here or online.
Katie, thank you very much. Oh, yep, that's lots of volume there. Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you so much to today's panelists for a powerful conversation. If you have a question for today's panelists, and as I look around the room, I know lots of you have questions for today's panelists. So please join me here at the microphone. If you're watching online on YouTube, type your question into the chat. We'll get to as many of those as we can. I'm already seeing lots of questions come through, so thank you to our live stream audience. Great questions at CMC can always be asked in just a sentence or two. And what punctuation mark does a question always end with? They end with question marks. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to start us off with this one. This is from the live stream audience. I am a older adult, age 53. I'm also an entrepreneur. The Affordable Care Act is good on paper, but not in practice. What should happen to help us stay solvent? So I think the question is, can the Affordable Care Act help? And what changes to it could be made?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Small question. Yeah, we touched very lightly on the intersection of healthcare and housing, but it is major. I don't know if I don't have a perfect answer for that, but what I will tell you is that every single experience that I've seen, both when I was over housing for seniors, as well as my own personal experience with my family, every single one of those levels of destabilization of housing as a senior happened after a health care episode. And so I think it is an appropriate question. I'm not sure if I'm expert enough to answer that question, but I do think that level of intersection should be centered as we speak about housing.
I'll just add that I don't think the solution is going to be one program or one policy change. Every single program that we deliver in our community cannot happen when an older adult is unhoused. If they have SNAP benefits, where are they keeping that food if they don't have a refrigerator? If they are getting modifications for falls because they're a fall risk and we don't want them to end up at the hospital, how does that happen when they don't have a house to modify? Absolutely every program that we provide and that have been the core of supporting older adults in our community for decades cannot happen when someone is unhoused. Literally the federal mandate is to keep people stable in their home rather than in a long-term care institution for our area agencies on aging, and you can't serve someone when they don't have a home. And so I think it's not just the Affordable Care Act, it's not just one solution, it is all of our policies recognizing that we cannot support folks if they are not housed.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey from CareSource. A question that I'd like to know is, are you aware of any organization in town where if you have somebody that's lonely or financially they're struggling, often property taxes is making them think I have to sell my place, where that organization or resource can pull parties together? And then why couldn't the state offer a reduction in property tax to that owner where you're bringing parties together? So it's a win-win. Humans love to socialize. You're going to mentally help those people out because now they have companionship, and we can't build enough fast enough, so we could help solve perhaps the property tax issue by reducing the burden on those seniors if they win-win together.
I'm happy to start, but please chime in. I would say we have pieces and parts of that. We have the statewide homestead exemption that does support folks that are older adults that have lived in their home that are struggling with property taxes. That is a very limited amount of folks who can access that. We used to have a much more robust system, but as we do as a state, we often reduce things, and that is a smaller window, a much lower income, and the reduction is off the value of your home, $25,000. Which I think we all know when we look at our property tax bills, that does not translate to a big reduction. So we have that. We have home sharing programs like Nesterly. We have ways to connect folks. I see someone who's going to ask a question who's from our village network, and I saw some members of villages in the room. Those are organizations that are neighborhood-based, supporting older adults who want to age in place, but aren't ready for traditional services. They just need someone to shovel their snow because they can't do that anymore, or change a light bulb because they don't want to get up on a ladder. And so we have pieces and parts, but I wouldn't say there's a comprehensive answer to all of those pieces coming together.
And the only other thing great question, the only other thing I want to highlight is what our Councilwoman said earlier. Usually those services are accessed late, right, and it just takes a moment to know that you are in that situation. And then you may, just because of how information is given, if you have any levels of intersectionality of class and poverty, and then on top of that of age and anything else, you may not have quick access to those type of programs. So.
And though the system might be fragmented and there's pieces and parts, if you call your local area agency on aging, to the best of our ability, we will at least pull those parts together and let you know what you might be qualified for. There will still be gaps, most likely, but at least we can be that comprehensive hub. Doug.
Thank you, Katie. Nicole Spicer, watching on YouTube, asks, in addition to building more affordable housing, what policy changes could happen to keep property owners from price gouging when it comes to rent?
Looking at you. These people online are so smart, aren't they?
And I know I know her. She could have texted me that yesterday and told me she was going to ask that today. We're actually looking at that again. We are a city of limited jurisdiction. And so when you think about being in the city of Columbus, and I think we oftentimes find ourselves in this very euphoric state here in the city, and then we realize that we actually live at a state house that is not interested in supporting people in staying in their homes, that is not interested in supporting affordability when it comes to housing, that is not interested in supporting the reduction of property taxes for folks, that is not interested in meeting the material real needs of the people that live here in this state. It becomes increasingly difficult to do that. There are things within, I think there are some things within the city's control, and we're ideating about what that could look like. Certain systems, applications that we know landlords are using, kind of backdoor applications that we know they're using, that we could say, maybe we make it harder for you to use, maybe we say you can't use those systems. But again, it's going to have to be a partnership. And there are folks at the State House, and let me say this because all my State House friends are going to text me like, not me. There are partners there. It's going to require advocacy at every level of government to be able to fix that issue. So thank you for the question, Michael.
Hi, I'm Katie Beaumont, Executive Director of At Home by High. I'm one of the villages in Columbus. So I have so much to say, but I'm gonna keep it tight. I think, first of all, my question to Councilmember Ross is, will the critical home repair program be starting again soon? It's been down for a while. I think that could be helpful. As well as, will policies begin to be put into place for housing seniors, making sure that they have dishwashers in units, washers and dryers in units, and in general, because we have such a home aid shortage, allow folks to have more autonomy within those spaces. If the elevator is broken, they can't get down to laundry rooms. And laundry rooms shouldn't just have 2 units for a 34 plus building. So lots to say, but I'll end it there.
Thank you for that question, and I will tell you that Marisa and I have been talking about those things already. I'm excited, and let me now just pause to honor former Councilmember Fran Ryan, who is in the room today, who without her, we would not, as a city, be where we are, particularly when it comes to support of our seniors. But I was raised by my grandparents, so seniors have a very close place in my heart, and I look forward to rolling out a senior housing agenda. And so I have been talking to folks at National Church Residencies, and the folks at Age Friendly, and the folks at AAA, and the folks at the Community Shelter Board to think about different policies that we could roll out that are senior specific as it relates to housing. That critical home repair program, one, needs more funding. I remember referring folks at the city attorney's office to the critical home repair program, and they would be on that wait list for 2, 3, 4 years. The need is there. We need more support to ensure that the folks that are reaching out to get that access has it. Those are the things that I know the administration is thinking about, particularly through the Resilient Housing Initiative, and really streamlining what those resources look like. So what I will do and commit to you today is that I will follow up with our partners at the administration to see when those dollars will be available, and whatever we can do on council to build the capacity of that program we are thinking about already. So I appreciate that. In addition to, and I was talking to Marisa a little bit about this on our call, thinking about even how we build and how are we incentivizing the building of housing to be age friendly on the front end, right? As we have homes that aren't it's going to be impossible to age in place without significant cost and significant retrofitting, right? Once you become a certain age. I know now my grandfather had a hard fall a few years ago, broke his neck, and we had to buy a chair so that he could get up to his bedroom. And that chair alone was $5,000, and but for the pulling together of his children and his grandchildren's money, I don't know that he would have been able to do it. And he is someone who has lived a blessed life and had a good amount of income, but again, those healthcare challenges and crises literally will throw someone who has been well off most of their life into crisis. And so thinking about how we just build housing in and of itself when we're building, because we're going to build a ton, thinking about what that looks like, thinking about operation. Everybody knows the federal government doesn't pay for services. They help pay for buildings, and you can build, and there's a lot of capital budgets. But a lot of times I was hearing from our folks at NCR that over half of the units in PSH are filled by seniors. And those are very costly homes, but the service side of that housing is just as important as the unit and of itself. So thinking about creative ways to just streamline services and provide those where those are needed as well. Very good question. I hope that we can have a conversation here soon too, so that I understand all of the things that you are thinking about and how we as a city can support.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriella Gresham, and I'm a superintendent student ambassador. And so for the last 2 years, as our community service project, we've been working with seniors to help build a bridge and connect with them, especially like with the problems they have, anything. We've just been lending a hand out to try and support them. And my question for you is, how can we as youth support seniors now instead of later and address the problems quicker?
Beautiful question.
You are speaking my language. I couldn't love that question more. I'm happy to start, and please, please, please chime in, because the answers are endless, honestly. There are big ways and there are small ways. I think that when we think in our community about older adults, it's not always a positive view. The jokes people make about aging, the way we talk about aging is terrible. We know that the impacts of the perception of aging from our healthcare system, ageism, we lose $63 billion, with a B, dollars a year in our healthcare system and Medicare and Medicaid spending to ageism. We do not invest in prevention for older adults. We do not take people seriously when they say, my shoulder hurts, oh, that's just age. And so I think it's recognizing the way we look and talk about older adults in our community as a first step. You know, I know you're not solving that healthcare issue, but thinking about your neighbors and saying hello, not making a joke about someone being old, not saying it's my 29th birthday again. I forget who it was, Doug, but someone on that live stream championed their age, 53, 38. We age drop a lot because we like to normalize it. I think it's really starting with how we talk about age is such a big part. Appreciate that question.
First of all, thank you for being here and taking initiative. I think that to piggyback off of your point, I was talking, I hope you don't mind me sharing this story. Lark's neighbor, 80 or so year old man, right? Snowmageddon happened. He was stuck in his home. And I remember asking, where are the kids? They don't shovel snow anymore. Where are the young people? They're not cutting grass anymore. Those are some of the services that we have such a hard time with in trying to make sure that seniors have a consistent access to those resources, right? So as you are thinking about, what type of information you can share with your seniors, also thinking about what kind of service you can provide to them, large or small, I think that would also be helpful as well.
We have just 2 minutes left for one final short question.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Bethany Ellis. I am a superintendent student ambassador of Columbus City Schools, and I happen to be a high schooler. I wanted to ask, to what extent is homelessness a housing supply issue versus a failure of our support systems? And who do you think should primarily be responsible for addressing the homelessness epidemic, like governments, nonprofits, or like specific individuals?
Wow. What a way to end it.
I'm gonna drop the mic. The answer is yes.
Right.
Yes, the answer is yes. Okay, girl. Excellent question. Let me, as I answer that question, if you all don't mind, I'll answer the question. As I answer the question, I'm going to also encourage you, as well as the sister that came before you, is that the one thing that you all have that you may not even know you have is the energy of youth. And if you're asking me what can you do now is build coalitions, be around each other and build out things. So the civil rights movement, yeah, we say Martin Luther King, but it was the students at North Carolina Chapel Hill that sat down. So you have the exuberance gift of energy. And that means that can you cut grass and shovel snow? Yes, but what you can do is coalesce through social media, through places that you are, transcending borders and communities, and craft out a multi-dimensional strategy per zip code and figure out, curate how you're going to make impact. And at the end of every quarter, 2 or 3 of you go up to that state house and demand that legislation changes for our communities and our seniors in it. Now, your question is, who owns homelessness? We all do. Is it a failure of support systems? In a way, it is a failure of our voice to not look up to say that the very basic thing should not ever have been commodified. And it is. And here we are, spending our time trying to figure out how to program our way out of that. So what I would tell you is, and I view this very strongly as someone who's in a nonprofit, who works with all of our public officials, that housing is a public issue, a collective issue of our taxes, to say that our #1 developer in this entire country, which was the government, the housing authority, has stopped developing housing during a time when the largest generation is aging and the second largest generation is coming of age, both of which times you need housing. So I would say the first we have to do is to stabilize that with our collective dollars, and then we add on that to our supportive dollars. But I do think it takes every single last one of us to say, we have a problem here.
All right. One of the hardest things about the Columbus Metropolitan Club is that every single week, like right at this moment when you want to hear more, I come on stage. I'm so sorry. I hope everyone's found today's conversation inspiring. Something that I specifically noted was your use of the word benevolence. I have 3 dictionary apps on my phone because I'm that type of nerd, and I wanted to know, like, what is the root cause and what's the root word for benevolence? But at its core, it's an act of kindness. And our mission here at the CMC is to create spaces for conversation, but the conversation doesn't end here on this stage. I really would invite every single person who's in this room to practice benevolence. We planted a seed of a lot of ideas, a lot of visions of what the current problem is and also how to solve them. And then on top of that, it's not just one individual. That last question and your response was so perfect because it's about this collective group of people right here in the room. Our private sector leaders, our public sector leaders, our nonprofit leaders, our retirees, all of us should practice ideas and concepts of benevolence as we think about how can we contribute to a better community as a group. All right. I want to thank the Community Shelter Board for sponsoring today's forum, Downtown Columbus Incorporated for complimentary parking. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor of our live stream for all those amazing questions, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We are so grateful for this space focused on service, so don't forget those service cards that are on your tables. Feel free to write a quick note to a kid and a veteran. But we're grateful to the National Veteran Memorial Museum for hosting us, and a very special thank you to our panelists, Shannon Isom, Tiara Ross, Marisa, Sheldon, and our host, Katie White. Let's give them all a round of applause. All right, friends, we are all about planting seeds here at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. So we have partnered with the library system, the Columbus Metropolitan Library, for recommended reading. If you're really passionate about this topic, a recommendation from them is And Housing for All, The Fight to End Homelessness in America by Marisa Forcarinci. Feel free to check that out at our local libraries. And then don't forget, we're doing this every single week. So we have our next forum next Wednesday, which is the Ohio Data Center Debate. I don't know a single person who does not have something to say about data centers. Whether you're for it or against it, please be here. Join us for a really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a great afternoon.